Hey everybody, welcome back to Dan's Chess Lounge. So today we're going to continue with our lectures on Bobby Fischer, starting all the way from the time that he first hit the scene, going all the way through to his later games in life. So in this game here, Fischer squared off against Di Camillo, and he was actually one of Fischer's mentors growing up. He was a very good chess player, playing out of the Philadelphia area. So this was going to be a good battle and a good test for the youngster. Remember, Fischer at this time in 1956, he was only 13 years old. So he was a very young kid, but he was brilliant though. So I want to go ahead and read a little excerpt before this game here that was written by Andy Soltis. We're working out of the Bobby Fischer Rediscovered book by Andy Soltis. And he states that Fischer's first nickname was the Corduroy Killer because he would show up day after day at the Brooklyn Chess Club in the same pants, sneakers, and sweater to play hours of chess. His progress to killer status was extraordinarily quick, even compared with much more recent prodigies such as Ponomaryov, Radjabov, and Karyakin. Fischer received a U.S. Chess Federation rating of 1830 after his first tournament outside Brooklyn, but within 2.5 years he was U.S. champion. "I just got good," Fischer explained. So with that, let's go ahead and check out and see what transpired over the chessboard. Fischer was white, Camillo black. Fischer plays e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and we could have a Scotch game here with d4. We could have an Italian game here with bishop c4. Let's see what Fischer will play. He decided to play the Ruy Lopez, bishop b5, and this is otherwise known as the Spanish game. It's been credited to the Spanish priest Ruy Lopez, and the idea is very simple. He wants to eliminate that knight there on c6, so this pawn here on e5 will eventually fall. a6, this is Morphy's defense. It was introduced by Paul Morphy, and it puts the question to the bishop right away. Now, if bishop captures the knight here, you have d takes c. The knight captures the pawn on e5, and black is not worried at all because black will play queen d4, and he'll be able to get his pawn back in the next move here because the knight and the pawn is under attack. And this is Morphy's idea and plan because he feels like this is better for black because now he has open diagonals for his bishops to come out. He has these open files here that he's going to put his rooks on. The king can castle queenside in the next couple of moves here. So basically black is going to have a lot of activity very fast. So this was Morphy's idea behind the whole a6 move, the Morphy's defense. Let's go back and see what happened in the game. Instead, Fischer decided to retreat the bishop back to a4. This is the common main line as well. Knight f6, this attacks the pawn on e4, castles, and if knight captures the pawn now, then black would just play rook e1. He could regain the pawn in the next couple moves here, no problem. So white doesn't worry about that pawn on e4 being unprotected in this position. Let's go back. So b5 is played here. Bishop retreats to b3 and d6. And d6 is not a very common line. It's one of the lesser played variations. More common is bishop going to b7 or bishop going to e7 or even bishop going to c5 on move number 6 here before he played d6. So those are more common continuations there. Instead of playing d6, the bishop would have came to c5. Also, now white could play g5 here, knight g5. And this was kind of the idea too behind playing d6. Black is trying to provoke white into playing this line here where the knight jumps in at g5. It looks scary for black right now, but it's really not. Uh, d5 will be played, pawn captures, and now the knight jumps into d4, hitting the bishop here on b3, and also black is going to reclaim his pawn here on d5 as well. So basically black is going to get the bishop pair, get his material back, be very active, and black is going to be completely fine in this position. So d6 was trying to entice white into playing that variation. But Fischer didn't go for that, though. Instead, he played c3 here. This is the main line continuation for white. This is usually what white does here. And then let's see here. Now, if black plays knight takes the pawn there on e4, it would be a blunder because then white would play d5. And that forks both knights there. That's a beautiful fork there. So instead, bishop g4 was played, and this hits the knight, but it pins the queen, and it's also trying to delay white from playing d4. So h3, this puts the question to the bishop. The bishop retreats back, and now you have d3. And Fischer, he didn't want to open up the center like right away. With d4. Instead, he wants to maneuver his pieces over to the king side and launch like a king side attack on black's king. And this knight maneuver here, where the knight goes to d2, to f1, then to g3, ultimately lands either on f5 or attacks the pieces here on h5. This is a typical maneuver that you see in these Ruy Lopez positions or even Italian game positions. It's quite common. Now you have bishop e7, black's developing, knight d2, knight b d2, white's developing. Both players are developing their pieces. Rook e1, this protects the e pawn for when white does want to play d4. It adds more reinforcement to the center. Queen d7, knight f1, the knight's doing his maneuvering. Knight a5 is a typical move that you will see. It hits the bishop, and it also makes way for the c pawn to advance. And so black usually plays on the queen side and in the center, as white will play on the king side. Bishop c2 retreats the bishop. He doesn't want to give up the bishop pair. h6 is played, and this gives luft to the king, and it also gives a little space where black can retreat his knight and reroute his knight to g5 and try to trade off some pieces in case white's attack is too hot. In case it's too dangerous, he can trade off some pieces. He can even play the bishop out to g5 as well, and is supported by the pawn on h6. g4. Now Fischer wasn't too concerned about his own king because he lashed out with g4 here. And so it's a bold strike there, hitting the bishop. The bishop retreats to g6, knight g3, knight h7. Here we go with black rewriting his knight back. And this knight here landed on a beautiful square on f5. The knight traveled a long distance all the way from b1 to land over here on f5. And it's a beautiful square. It attacks this king side square here, g7. So that is a beautiful knight there. It's a very dangerous knight right there. Knight b7 here. Black's knight wants to reroute to e6 so it can help defend over here on the king side. Black needs all of his pieces for his defense. d4. So now Fischer wanted to strike out in the center with d4. Now was the time to break. E takes D, C takes D, and now you have knight D8. Black's going for that E6 square to help out on the king side. And now Fischer decided to swap off his knight that he spent all those tempos on for the bishop that wasn't really doing anything. So let's see how the game turns out, if that was a good move or bad move. Queen takes E7, and now you have D5 here. C5, black strikes out on his queen side because that's what he is supposed to do. That's where his counterplay is at. But unfortunately, all of black's pieces, minor and major pieces, are over here on the king side. There's only his rook here. It's only his rook that's on the queen side. So it's going to be hard for him to mount some type of queenside attack when there's only one piece over there. Bishop F4, knight B7. So since Fischer played this D5 move, it took away these squares here on C6 and E6 for the knight to jump in. So the knight has to reroute back over here to the queen side. Bishop G3 is like a waiting move, and also it just protects the bishop because the bishop was undefended and loose on the F4 square. There's a saying that goes, loose pieces drop off. Rook F E8. A4. Now Fischer is using a lot of patience in this game. He's playing on all areas of the board, and he's just making sure that all of his loose ends are tied up, and he's not just lashing out with a big kingside attack. He's playing a very patient game of chess. Queen F6. This hits the unprotected pawn on B2. A takes B, A takes B, and King G2. Now this offers up that B pawn here, and let's see what would happen if black would snap that pawn off. Then you would have Rook B1 hitting the queen. Queen moves out the way. Now Rook captures pawn and also hits the knight, and black's queen side is falling apart. So this would not be a good continuation for black to snap off that pawn on B2. Black's would-be attack on the queen side is already fizzled out. So he didn't play that. He played knight G5, trying to swap off some pieces on the king side. And Fischer does that. Now, black takes with the pawn because he wants to try to stop Fischer from playing F4 and throwing all of his pieces up the board here. And if taking with the pawn here is much better than if he would have captured with the queen. Because then Fischer could have played his pawn moves with tempo. You have rook takes, E5 here, hits the queen. Bishop captures, queen captures, pawn captures, bishop captures, and queen D8, which hits the pawn there. So let's just stop here and reassess the position because we had a couple trades here. And let's see exactly what's going on. The bishops and rooks got traded here, a pair of them. And white has this nice passed pawn here on D5. That's a beautiful passed pawn there. And so that's going to be his strength. That's what he's going to try to focus on. Black has these two passed pawns here on the queen side, and he's going to try to push these pawns down the board as well. So that's going to be the game plan, it looks like. White is going to try to push his pawn. Black is going to try to make a passer out of his pawns. And white wastes no time at all. He gets started. He's only 2 squares away from promotion already. So Fischer had no fear. It's hard to believe that he was only 13 years old at this time. He played pretty fearless here. So he plays D6, and there's a couple continuations here. Let's check a few of them out here. You can play knight captures pawn, and this is worth taking a look at. Queen captures the pawn on C5. Knight jumps in to C4. Queen captures pawn on b5. Now you have queen d3. Now this is threatening a nice tactic here. If the knight is able to go to e3 with check, then black would win the white queen there. So that's a nice tactic that he was threatening. But Fischer would just play queen c5, most likely. Rook a2. So now you have two pieces on the pawn there on b2. Bishop c3. And at the end of this line here, it's better for white. White is attacking this pawn here on g5. And the king is just way, way, way too exposed. It's by itself, basically. You have rook e8 coming, forcing the king off of the back rank. So it's not going to be a good look here for the black king. So this would be much better for white. So that's not a good continuation. So let's go back in the game. So knight takes pawn is not that good for black. So Camillo decided to play c4 and continue with the plan of trying to push his pawns. Queen e4, this hits the knight. Knight c5. Queen c6, this hits the knight and the pawn. So then the knight jumps into d3, which forks the rook and the bishop. Rook comes up to e3 here. Rook c8 hits the queen. Now here, if white would play queen captures the pawn, this is a blunder. This is not a good decision because now rook c5 forks the queen and the bishop. So that would be losing there. So that pawn on b5 is untouchable. So Fischer plays queen b7. So now he's threatening to play d7 and promote the pawn. Rook b8, queen d5. Now there's a lot of threats here. White can actually exchange sack his rook for the knight there on d3. He's going to get the pawn too. He's going to get the knight and the pawn, the c pawn, and have a better position because black would still have to deal with the threats of the pawn promoting. White could also play d7, and then that would be a discovery on the rook here. And then he's still one square away from promoting. So there's a lot of threats going on right here. It's starting to look like it's overwhelming for black to handle all the threats. Knight b4, this hits the queen. Queen goes to c5, attacks the knight. The knight has to go back to d3. Queen goes to d4. Now Fischer has formed this battery. It's threatening this pawn here on g7. And again, you still have this exchange sack that Fischer can go with as well. Rook b6 and d7. And Aaron Nimzowitsch has said that passed pawns must be pushed. And that's what Bobby Fischer did. He played d7, pushing the pawn. It's only one square away from promotion. Rook b7. Now you have this beautiful move here. Bishop c7. It interferes with the rook hitting the pawn there. And it attacks the queen. It's a brilliant move here. Now there's a couple possibilities here. What would happen if the rook captured the bishop? If rook captures the bishop, then you have rook e8. This just loses the game. Black would lose his queen. So that does not work. So what happens if black plays queen captures c7? If the queen captures c7, then you have, again, rook e8, followed by the pawn promoting very soon. And this is actually going to lead to a forced mate. So this doesn't work for black. So what does black do? Black tries knight f4, check. This is the last desperation attempt. So he's hoping that Fischer would play bishop captures knight. Then black would snap off the pawn there on d7. Bishop captures g5. The queens get traded off. And then the bishop gets traded off. And this result here is a draw. This would be a drawn position here. This is what black is hoping for. But of course, the great Bobby Fischer was not going to fall for that. He was not going to play that. He was not going to play Bishop captures knight. Instead, he just played the very simple King F1. And now black is out of checks, and there's no way to stop the pawn from promoting. There's no way to stop rook going to E8 check, winning the queen, and then the pawn would promote. So Camillo just resigned at this moment here. And this was a beautiful win for Bobby Fischer. You got to remember, Fischer is only 13 years old. So very, very impressive. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more.